Hello, salut, bonjour. I'm very good at French. Um, so it's really cool to be here, especially because React Europe was the first conference I've ever been to 2 years ago. And when I went to my first conference, I hadn't done any work in open source or in React, and I was overwhelmed with how everyone was collaborating, sharing ideas. It was super inspiring for me. And it was also my first trip on foreign soil. So I bought this shirt because I had to be like super classy or something. And I've been wearing this shirt to every conference I've been to after. I mean, it even has holes in it. Look, I have a hole here, if you can see it. But it's my lucky charm now, so I'm holding on to it. Um, so, introducing myself. My name is Ives van Hoorne, which is very hard to pronounce, even in the Netherlands. So you can call me Yves, Ives, Oivelovs. Every pronunciation is possible. My friends call me even Flip. So if you want to call me Flip, that's possible as well. I'm a software developer at an auction website called KettleWiki, and I'm also a computer science student at the University of Twente. You can find me on there. So, today I will talk about something that I've built almost 2 years ago now, called CodeSandbox. And first I'd like to know who of you have heard of CodeSandbox before? Whoa! And who of you have used CodeSandbox? Oi, doi, oi. That's so cool. Okay, let me just give you a show you quickly what CodeSandbox is. So, I always want to first show the homepage. Do we have Wi-Fi? Yeah. So this is the homepage, and it has these cool cubes, like. I worked a week on this. I need to show this at every conference talk. And CodeSandbox started out as a React editor and now supports other frameworks as well. But this is CodeSandbox, and it looks very much like your local editor. So you have code here, you have multiple files, you can add npm dependencies, and you can also change the package.json to add npm dependencies. The unique thing about CodeSandbox is the preview on the right, or at the bottom, or you can also put it here if that's your preference. You can put it anywhere, and it updates when you change code, like for example React Europe, and let's make it international. Bonjour. And another unique thing about CodeSandbox is that it works completely offline. So I can do it. If I would go offline and now I don't have a connection and start editing, it will still update because all the code is bundled and transpiled. All the Shazam is done in the browser. Okay, this is tricky. That works. Okay. So that is CodeSandbox. And previously I've talked about CodeSandbox what it is and what the features are. But CodeSandbox recently turned 1 year old, and it has grown an insane amount in that year. We now have 500,000 monthly visitors, and lots of sandboxes and files have been created. So I want to talk about the story of building CodeSandbox and how it grew from a side project to something that's starting to frighteningly look like a business. And also because React Europe was a huge influence in CodeSandbox. So let's get the story started. 2 years back, I came back from React Europe 2016, and I was determined. I wanted to get involved in open source work. I started writing issues. I started opening pull requests. And I also started writing a lot of ideas down. These are all the ideas that I wrote down. And I did it like this. Whenever I had a problem, I would look for either a pull request to open for the problem, or I would write an idea down for an open source project or an open source tool to solve the problem. And that's also how CodeSandbox, the idea of CodeSandbox came to be. We were on vacation to a beautiful village called St. Ives 2 years ago. And you can probably guess why we went there, because my name is in there. And at the time I was still working full-time for KettleWiki, and we were converting our Ruby on Rails pages to React. And I got questions from my coworkers about React and about React in combination with dependencies, but I didn't have my MacBook with me, so I wasn't able to answer any questions. And what I had to do is I had to take their code snippets from Slack, put them through my Ives interpreter and give back the answers, but my Ives interpreter is outdated, so it didn't work. And because of that, it was very cumbersome. So that's when I started thinking, what if I would have my local development environment everywhere? And the next question was, what if I would have my local development environment on the web? So, like all the other ideas, it got added right there on my idea node board. And I didn't do much with it because I started studying. So I started doing studenty things. I started going to parties and such. And this was a lot of fun. But at some point, it started to become, I started to feel unproductive. And you can see it in my contribution graph. I started going to university here, and it was like at the beginning, there's a kind of a big hole in it. And sometimes I desperately try to build something, but then I failed. So I got the first idea that I had on this list, which was a browser React editor playground that allows you to create components instantly. This should be our new slogan. It's super vague, but I started working on this idea. And I have a lot of screenshots about the development. So I started working on this during my Java lectures because there's nothing better to do during Java lectures. And the initial idea was very simple. It was a component editor, so just for React components. And you would have code on the left, preview on the right. It was very much inspired by React Style Guidist because they had a component editor as well, and I was impressed by how fast it worked. And in this sidebar, you could click on a component to edit it. So in the next Java lectures, I started implementing it in code. And this was, I vividly remember taking this screenshot because this was the first working version of it. And when you started typing code, it would update real time on the right side. And it was such a cool feeling. And it worked. It was pretty simple. It still is pretty simple. I built two applications, an editor and a preview. The editor just is the UI, it's built in React, it's the code, and the preview is the bundler. So when the editor has, when you change code in the editor, we would post message to the preview, which is in an iframe, the code. The code would go through transpilers, be evaluated using eval, and then you would get back errors if there are errors. And CodeSandbox still works like this to this day. The core has never changed. The core idea, I mean, the code has been rewritten 20 times, but the core idea has never changed. And I started working more on this. And here you can see that we already got more, like we got tabs. And the cool thing is that you could import. Maybe I can zoom those things. Well, the cool thing is that you had tabs here, and you could import those tabs right there. And this means that you could import components in components. And I thought, this could be bigger. And not making it a component editor, but a component library editor. So imagine that as a company, you can put all your components in CodeSandbox and then have a whole playground to play with all the components and be able to edit the components. And I got really enthusiastic about this idea. So a day later, we got this. And this has a sidebar where you can edit, where you had like multiple projects, and you could import projects in projects. And imagine that like the big project was a form, and then you had dependency projects, like the dependency project was a button, and the dependency project 2 was an input. So you could like import different projects inside each other. But this started to look very much like an editor. Those projects looked a lot like directories, but they weren't directories. And I thought that this would be very confusing if you have like an editor, like not really an editor, but it looks like an editor, but it isn't really an editor. So I started implementing directory support. On the 17th of December, we got directory support. And this started to look too much like an editor. So I thought, maybe it's a cool idea if we would have like, if people could go online, create components, and then click publish, and then everyone that creates components on CodeSandbox would be able to import those. So let's say someone creates a button on CodeSandbox, click publish, and then someone else can create a form, and they can just import that button instantly. So I got that idea, but for that to work, we had to have NPM support. So 2 weeks later, whoosh, there was NPM support. And this was an example with Material UI, and this cat is super popular in the Netherlands, so I used this cat. And you can see a very clear pattern here. the idea started with a component editor. Then the idea grew to a component library builder. Then the idea changed to an online component library builder, to the point that it's started to land at online React editor. And I learned from this that I should let the idea evolve. I've thrown away many projects because I thought that the idea was not good enough. But I found out that if you even start with the idea, then as you start working on the project and you start writing code, you'll get new ideas and the course of the whole project will change. And that's why whenever I get an idea, I would just start working on it, and it will probably change for the better over time. So this was in January. It was looking very polished. I was almost ready to release it. I started getting my friend Bas involved to help with me with the design. But then I lost motivation. I got distracted by life, and sometimes happens. It's one of the worst things. And when I got enough time to work on CodeSandbox again, I didn't see it as a cool thing. When I built NPM support, after that I thought, whoa, this is super cool. But as I was using it every day, it started to lose its novelty for me. So I thought that others wouldn't be interested in using CodeSandbox as well, because it was quite normal. So you can see it clearly in the commits that I stopped working on it. And that was for a couple months. But then I met some other students, and they asked me, hey, where have you been in the past few months? You weren't at all the parties, because I was working on CodeSandbox. And I started showing them CodeSandbox, and I said, this is a side project that I've built. And they got really enthusiastic, more enthusiastic than I initially anticipated. So I thought, well, maybe people will be actually interested in this. And I said to myself, okay, I'll get 1 week to finish all the features that are left open right now. And if after that week there are features that are not finished yet, I will just cut them off the project and I will just release it, just to get rid of it, kind of. So I started this huge development mountain, and that was when we released CodeSandbox. And I learned from this that I should always seek external feedback, because if you're looking at it every day, you don't have like a very good view on your project anymore. And one very good way to do is just to release fast. If you release something, then there are hundreds of people that initially tried and also want to let their opinions know of the project. And maybe they are much interested in a different part of the project that you never anticipated. So release fast is nice. Another thing that I've learned is to follow KISS, which means keep it simple, stupid. And you can have two interpretations. You can say keep it simple and stupid, but I like the interpretation keep it simple, stupid. And my interpretation of KISS is that you should not over-engineer. So when you build a feature, you should make it very simple, just good enough. With CodeSandbox we did the same. And then based on how people use the feature, you can rewrite it to make it better for the use cases that are made clear by the users. So that's the other thing I learned. But then I released it on the 2nd of April 2017. And I released it at that time for my 60 high school friends, because I had 60 high school friends as followers. I got 2 likes, and that was it, the end. No, then we decided to release it on Reddit, and it got much more response. It even got Reddit Gold. That's an achievement. And this was when CodeSandbox got a lot more attention from a lot of people. And I got really happy because, for example, someone I still look up to, Dan Abramov, tweeted about CodeSandbox. I got so happy because of that. But I also got very creative feedback. Like, there was a feedback, marry me, I'm in love with you, this is delicious, thank you, I've included you in my will. This is the best feedback you can get, right? And after some time, we also started to be mentioned on the homepage of Hacker Noon, and I was living on this cloud 9, even though it's also an online editor, but I was living on the cloud 9 of happiness. And as CodeSandbox got more popular, showing this scientific graph, I started to get distracted from my study a lot, which was sort of a problem. At the beginning, I tried to combine CodeSandbox with my studies 50-50, which was not doable. I started getting more distracted by CodeSandbox, and every idle thought would go to CodeSandbox. CodeSandbox would be my procrastination, which, yeah, I couldn't combine it. So pretty early in my studies, I decided to not apply for new lectures. So even though I'm a student and I get the student perks, I don't go to lectures. But we got so much feedback from people and lots of feature requests, and it was used in ways that we never expected. So that's why we set up 3 values for CodeSandbox to measure all feature priority by. And the 3 values are lower the learning curve, encourage sharing and discovery, and give a local editor experience trademark. So I will explain every feature with a quick demo, every value with a quick demo of a feature that we've made that covers that value. So the first one is lower the learning curve. And what we mean by this is people started using CodeSandbox to learn React, which I didn't expect before, but makes a lot of sense because people don't have to set up their local development environment before they can start playing with it. So they can just go to codesandbox.io/s/new, start editing the white text, and they're an official software developer. And we also built some other features that help lower the learning curve. And I have a demo. Demo. So with CodeSandbox, we have control over everything. We have control over the files, over the code editor, and over the preview. So we can get a lot of data from this. And in this demo, I'm going to throw an error, which is very confusing. I have this bonjour component and hello component. Bonjour is a raw component. I forgot to add an extension, which happens more often than you expect. And if I change this, you get an error. And normally, you get this error, invalid character error, failed to execute create element on document, the tag name provided is not a valid name, and it's thrown on render. And this can be very confusing because it's not really clear what the error is. And in our case, we can detect, oh, they're importing a raw module, so it seems like index.js is importing a raw module, bonjour, and we show a suggested solution. So you can click rename bonjour to bonjour.js, and it will rename it, and then it will work. So so that is one example of using our whole flow to help beginners learn React. We also have encourage sharing and discovery, which is sharing is pretty obvious because you can share a URL of your sandbox and then someone else can fork it and then they can continue with it. And you can also, for example, create embeds on any page and then people can play with your examples, also on Medium, by the way, and just do crazy stuff. But discovery is more interesting for me. So let's say I have a very simple demo. So let's say that you need help, you need to find an example, you're learning React Router DOM, and you also want to know how it works in combination with React Transition Group. Now you can filter on those 2 dependencies, and you will find every project that has been created on CodeSandbox that includes those 2 dependencies. So if you ever need an example of how a dependency works, we have more than 360,000 examples with different kind of dependencies that you can just browse through for learning a new dependency, for example. The last one is local editor experience, and there are multiple reasons to do this. Local editor experience is mainly at the beginning because when people were learning React on CodeSandbox, we didn't want to create any friction when they wanted to go offline. So when they wanted to take their project offline in the local editor, they shouldn't learn a new environment. The second one is that people actually build cool applications on CodeSandbox. That's really cool to see. And the third one is that, for example, in workshops, Kenzie Dots, for example, uses CodeSandbox in his workshops, and he's doing a workshop about testing. So we have, for example, support for jest testing, like your local editor. But we have a lot more. We have jest testing, GitHub importing, GitHub committing, deploying. You can build an application from the start on CodeSandbox, export it to GitHub, make commits, and then deploy a production version using Tide. So you never need to leave the browser if you want to build an application. And we also, 1.5 months ago, we released something new called CodeSandbox Live. And it's CodeSandbox Live. It's literally real-time collaboration in the browser. And this has been behind a kind of, you had to pay monthly to use it over the past 1.5 months. But from today, it's free for everyone to try out. And I can give you a very quick example of how it works. So you have these side things for GitHub and deployment, but you also have live. And when you click go live, oh, the network connection may be a bit, yeah, oh, that's it. So when you go live, you get this URL that you can use. You can share it with others, and people will then be able to edit at the same time. I'm giving 5 seconds if people can even read it, but not more than. Yeah, there's someone in. Fess. Okay. Yes. But luckily, we also have classroom mode. In classroom mode, you can say who can edit. So I can now not allow them to edit anymore. So now I can say that they can be an editor, but they are not allowed to edit. Oh, it's becoming a bit much now. I'm closing the session. But and I think because of building these features is the reason that CodeSandbox has grown a lot over the past year. I think, for example, we released CodeSandbox Live around here, and we released the search for CodeSandbox around here, and you can clearly see that there is a correlation between releasing new features and people using CodeSandbox. So I think building features is more important than kind of marketing But it's becoming a bit too much. We get so many emails now, so many issues, so many pull requests, and it's stressful. You have meetings, and now I took the responsibility to go to too many conferences, and it's very hard to work on CodeSandbox now. And since people are now also, we have a lot of people that pay for the live feature before, and also for private sandboxes. So we got enough money to hire people. This is becoming a bit scary, but we've hired Bogdan and Luca in the past 2 months, and since this month he's working full-time for CodeSandbox. And next month we're hiring 2 more people. Those are yet unknown, so if you're ever interested in working on an online editor based on React with fancy stuff, then just come up to me. And what the future for CodeSandbox holds, we're now currently working on a dashboard. People that use CodeSandbox may have noticed that it's unusable if you want to organize your sandboxes. I have 350 sandboxes and I cannot organize them. And this dashboard will make it easier for you. You have directories on the left, and you can put sandboxes in directories and organize them as if they are in a file structure. And there's also coming something like CodeSandbox teams, in which teams can create directories, and every sandbox in that directory is editable by everyone in the same team. So that's coming. And yesterday I met Jared, and he's huge on Reason, and he asked me, what would it take to get Reason React support in CodeSandbox? And I thought, I don't know. And an hour later, we got a working version of Reason React. I can maybe give a very small demo. Yeah, so that one is definitely on the roadmap to very soon. We're also completely open source, so if you're ever interested in contributing or opening issues, not opening issues, well, then you can go to computer/CodeSandbox client. And yeah, I want to thank everyone. Do I have time left? Because I can do one small demo. Oh, nice. Okay, I never do this demo if I don't have time left because it's so tricky. So for example, if I have this sandbox, I fork it. I want to export this sandbox to GitHub and then also make a commit and show you these kind of features that we have. So let's say I'm calling it React Europe. Okay, and now I'm doing CodeSandbox React. I haven't tested this before I went here, so I'm not sure if. Okay, now we have a if you go to GitHub now, you can see that this is the React. And I can also change stuff, so let's make it international again. Bonjour. It will create a fork, which you can see as a branch from the GitHub repository. We will detect that source hello has changed, and we can say change. I'm always so descriptive in my commits. And we created the commit, and if we check back, it has a commit called change. Oh, and Prettier has also run on it, but you can see these kind of things. But you can see that it updated to bonjour. And yeah, that's my last kind of demo. Thank you very much for listening. And wow, this is impressive. And I also have stickers. So if you want stickers, just come by me. And also if you want things like happy thoughts, I'm always full with happy thoughts. So see you later, alligator.